Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Nick here, and today we're going to take a look at Mystery Express from Days of Wonder. I'll apologize up front, this is one of the few Days of Wonder games that is out of print. They're not currently making it, which, given its pedigree, is a mystery. See what I did there? When I say pedigree, I'm sorry about that. When I say pedigree, I mean that the two designers of this game are Antoine Bauza and Serge Laget. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Now, Serge Laget I only know him from one game, but that game is stupendous, and that's Shadows over Camelot, one of my top 5 games of all time. I think it's like 2 or 3 the last time I did the rankings. Antoine Bauza, however, is probably my favorite designer. Eric Lang is really horning in on his territory, but man, I own several of his games, and they are all awesome. I could go on and on about them. I'm not going to bother. You know what they are. But given that pedigree and given the fact that it's from Days of Wonder, who is responsible for some of my favorite games, like Shadows over Camelot, I was super excited to try this and was wondering why it's out of print. Why don't more people talk about it? Why does it seem to have a lukewarm or bad reputation in certain circles? Well, I played it a couple times. Let's go ahead and do a brief overview of the game. Then we're going to come back and we'll get to the bottom of the mystery. Okay, I'm just going to do a very brief walkthrough of Mystery Express because there's a lot of finicky little rules to this game, and I know I'll probably get something wrong if I try to give you excruciating detail, and it's going to take forever. So just to give you a taste of the game, I'll tell you essentially what it's about. This is a competitive game for 2 to 5 players where you are on the Orient Express. I'm sorry, it's 3 to 5 players, by the way. You're on the Orient Express, and there has been a murder, and you're trying to figure out who the murderer was, what their motive was, where they did it, what they used to do it, and what time that they did it. So this is essentially Super Clue, if you've ever played the board game Clue. This is a much more complicated version of that. So this is the board representing, the top part of the board represents the different train cards, and there's a little icons indicating what the actions and how long they take are, and that each train card is associated with. You have crime cards, which are all the cards that are used in the game are called crime cards, and those are going, and time cards as well, 2 different types of cards. Those are going to fill up the spots here on the conductor's side of the board and also the passenger side, and I'll get back to those in a moment. And then here are the different stops that the train is going to go through. So as you go from round to round, you're going to move the train, and different things may happen depending on what round that it is. Each player is going to get a character sheet, which also functions as a folder, which has a little cheat sheet for some of the different rules in the game, but also is where you're going to keep your suspicion sheet. Now, the suspicion sheet has all the different types of cards that are in the game, the crime cards. The modus operandi, why they did it. Their motive, how they did it, clubbed, hanged, poisoned, then their motive and why they did it, their suspect, like who actually you think did it, the location, and then all the times on the bottom. You can mark whatever you want on this sheet, and you do it in secret. So you can keep track. It's just a way for you to keep track of things from round to round and try to keep track of where the cards are in relation to the game. Because what happens is at the beginning of the game, you're going to take one of each of the different types of cards. A time card, the modus operandi card, the location, the motive, the suspect, and I'm going to spoil it here. There's like here, the suspect cards will have a picture of a person and the name, and then why they did it with their motive and their location. And the time has, of course, an analog time of when the crime occurred. You'll take one of these without looking at them, one of each of these, put them underneath the board, and that is all the knowledge in the game. That is who did it, why, all that different stuff. The rest of the players are trying to figure out why that is. So each player is going to get a bunch of cards at the beginning of the game. They're trying to deduce what all of these cards are throughout the course of the game. So you'll get a bunch of crime cards at the beginning, and like I said, you'll put some out here on the board for the passengers and for the conductor. Then the game is going to begin. Now, depending on what location you're at, you have a certain amount of hours to work with. Hours dictate how many actions you can take on your turn. You can move as many spaces as you want, but it's going to take time to do some of the actions. So, for instance, when you're on your way from Paris to Strasbourg, you only have 4 hours to work with, and some of these actions take 2 hours, 3 hours. Some of them take a variable amount of hours, so you need to make sure that you have the time to do what you want to do as far as investigating. As you go to each location, you also flip over a conductor token, and that will tell you where the conductor is going to be. If you're in a spot with a conductor and you end your time there, then you're going to be able to look at one of these conductor cards and then you'll immediately put it into your discard pile and then replace it. Now, the goal of all of this, the whole game is all about seeing cards. Seeing cards that are on the board, seeing cards that are in other players' hands, knowing the cards that are in your hand, because you're trying to eliminate variables. There's only 3 of every crime card. So if in a single round of play, you have seen the same card 3 times in 3 different spots, you know for sure that that is not one of the cards that is here taken out at the beginning of the game. So you can immediately eliminate that as a possibility. If you've seen the poison card 3 times in a single round, you have almost guaranteed that it is not one of these cards, and therefore that is not going to be what one of these cards are. You can eliminate that, mark it on your sheet, you're good to go. The reason for that is that every time a card is seen by any player, that player is going to put it underneath this token corresponding to their character, which is their discard pile, and it will never go back into circulation until the next round, at which point everyone takes their cards back. So it's very important that in one round you try to see as many cards as possible. That's essentially what the game is. And all of these different cars of the train are going to let you do different things to try and see as many cards as possible. So, for instance, one of the spots lets you swap cards with players. So they each give you a certain crime card that you mentioned, and then you have to give them cards in exchange. One of the spots just lets you spend a number of hours equal to a number of players, and each of those players must show you one of their cards of your choice. Another spot, a very risky spot, lets you take this luggage bag into your hand if you spend you spend 1 hour, and if there's you put it into your hand, choose another player, and that player has to guess which hand you have the bag in. It's kind of weird. And if they guess incorrectly, you get to look at a card from their hand. And that might take an extra hour. There's another spot over here where you have the player to your right or left pass you a certain card. You get to look at it, put it in your discard pile. Then you pass the next player the same type of card, location, modus operandi, whatever it is. And then it keeps passing around. So, a lot of the actions that you do are going to let other players gain information as well, but it's something that you have to do in order to get as much information as possible. I already mentioned what the conductor does, but now the passenger spot, 2 certain spots on the board, which are indicated once you remove the conductor tokens, that have a little picture of the passengers. The first time that happens, you'll remove one of the passenger tokens, and the second time you'll remove the other. At that point, if you go to this train car over here, you get to the action that you can take for 3 hours is to look at one of the cards in these 2 stacks, depending on whether one or both of them has been unlocked yet. And again, that's another thing that you can look at in order to gain more information, get it out of the game, know that that's not one of the cards potentially that's in this stack. And finally, I know I'm just kind of rushing through this, but again, there's a lot of little intricacies here. When you get to Budapest, a couple different things will happen. First off, every player is going to take a card from their hand, reveal it, and then remove it from the game. So that's another extra bit of information as you're getting down to the wire. But also, then you're going to take one of these telegraph sheets, and you're going to write down your final suspicions of all the different 5 elements of the game, and put it face down, together with the other players, indicate whose is whose, and put it off to the side. This is going to be for final endgame scoring because, of course, it's very, very difficult for someone to get every single element right, although it can obviously happen. But in order to determine the winner, if someone doesn't get all 5 elements right, you're going to try to get as many as you can right and earn points for those. And the telegraph is another way to either gain points or eliminate points. If you can guess correctly before you actually get to the big reveal after the final stop, then you're going to gain more points. But if you guess incorrectly on the telegraph, then you'll have to subtract points. So it's just another way of gaining or losing points. And I should mention the time cards. Now, the time cards are the one thing that you can't glean from just doing any of the different player actions or from going to the different spots on the board. Instead, at certain points as you go through, you're going to have to do the time action. So one player will be designated to basically do 3 different things with the cards depending on what stop it is. So, for instance, the first, all these cards have different analog times of all the different potential types of times. Again, there's 3 of each. The first stop, one player is going to take the deck of cards and just start flipping them over at whatever the speed they deem appropriate. The second spot, that player is going to deal the cards out equally to each of the players. Then they're going to say go, and each player looks at the deck of cards that they have, tries, and you cannot take notes on any of these as you do these actions. They look at the cards for a certain amount of time, the player says, okay, pass. You pass that stack of cards to the next player, take the other stack from the other player, and look at those until everyone's gone around once. And then the final time, one player is going to deal out the cards one at a time in 3 separate stacks, covering the other cards over in order, so that the fourth card goes on the first card, etc. And as you're doing all three of these things, you're trying to look at the cards and remember them as much as possible, because again, there's only 3 of each time, so you can start eliminating variables, keeping track on your sheet which times you've already seen, which ones you've already seen a lot of in the same round. Therefore, you know that it can't be underneath here with the rest of the motive cards and such, the crime cards. And that's the game. All players also have special powers, which are going to, like the orange player, yellow player, is going to let you get extra time. The other players correspond to different types of crime cards. They'll let you, when a player discards a certain type of crime card, you can immediately look at it once per turn, things like that. But that's the game. Try to see as many of the crime cards as you can in a turn in order to eliminate variables. And when you get to the final stop, try to deduce what the final stack of crime cards is. That's the Mystery Express in a nutshell. Well, mystery solved. This game kind of sucks. I was very, very sad that I did not have that much fun with this game. Well, I should say that the second play of this game, we had no fun whatsoever. The first play of this game, we had a lot of fun that was purely incidental to whatever was happening with the board game and all of its components. There's a lot of really interesting things here. I certainly love the theme. The components are Days of Wonder quality. I mean, they're awesome, although I'd say they're early Days of Wonder quality. And I say that because while the artwork is good, the boards are sturdy, the cards are great, all that stuff, the miniatures that they used are like these metal painted torso bust miniatures, which are cool, but the ones that I got came pre-damaged, which was great. There are like little flecks missing, things like that. But and I've kind of heard of other people encountering that problem as well. So they're just not that sturdy and they get kind of dinged up. But really, that by Days of Wonder standards, it can be considered just okay. By any other gaming publisher standards, the components are awesome. So there's no complaints there. The rulebook is awful. The rulebook is really bad. Nothing is laid out clearly. It's just paragraph after paragraph, blocks of text. It looks like I'm reading a short story or a thesis paper. It's just not good. So that's a huge complaint. As far as the gameplay, so. Well, now let's talk about the theme. Well, they are integrated. I will say this, that I'm not going to say that it feels like you're on the Orient Express trying to solve a murder, but the theme works for this, for what it is. This game is Hyper Clue. That's what it is. It's Super Clue, Hyper Clue. It's Super Clue Ultra Fighter 3 EX Edition is what this is, okay? There's much more strategy involved here, but there's also much more randomness involved here. But it's certainly, you can get kind of dragged into the theme. It can going through the different train cars, and because there's so much of this game where you're just kind of talking and bantering with your friends, the theme can kind of come out in that way. So I'm not going to knock it too hard for the theme in this regard, but that gameplay, the thing about it is so random, and it is so, hard to keep track of all these things. I mean, listen, I'm not the smartest person when it comes to a game like this. I'm the first one to admit it, absolutely. And I wouldn't say I got crushed in both of these games. I certainly made a showing of the games that we played, but it wasn't that good for me. But that's fine. I mean, I don't have to be good at a game to enjoy it, but I didn't enjoy this. And because it felt like work, and I think that was a general consensus of most of the people that we played with. It felt like we were doing paperwork. It's hard to describe. I mean, which you literally are. I mean, whenever I encounter a game where there's a lot of note-taking, like literal note-taking involved, it's a red flag for me. It doesn't mean the game's going to be awful, but it means that it's something that I should really look into. And maybe I should have looked into this one more, but I definitely wanted to give it a shot. It is interesting how some of the mechanics work, how there's different train cars do different things, although the stupid bag one where you hold the bag, I mean, that is your last-ditch effort to get any shred of information whatsoever, and it's just awful. But some of the other ones are interesting. It's interesting how certain compartments only open up the visitors or the guest compartment, where you get to look at more cards. It can be very, very vital information. The conductor, how he moves around, how you can talk to him. Those are neat things. Those are all little neat mechanics. But at the end of it all, the game just feels like it drags on and on. It's way longer than it should be for what the game is. It really is. It doesn't look like it's that complicated. I guess it's not, but learning the ins and outs of all the different maneuvers, and constantly passing cards back and forth. Everyone groaned and threw up their hands when people took the action that has you pass a card to your neighbor, and that one passes a card. And I mean, it's one of the best ways you can get information, but it's also the most aggravating for everybody involved. So everything just feels clunky. It just feels slow. Oh, man. And when I said before that we did have a lot of fun in the first game, it was because as we actually, sifted through or, dug through the rules as such as they are to get to how the game actually plays, and things just kept getting more and more ridiculous. We read through all the different actions of the training cards, and we're like, that's kind of a pain. I mean, all right, really? All right, whatever. Then we get to the time, the way that the time works, and how you try to divine that. And I read through, it was my game. I was the one in charge of reading the rules, and my buddy Greg, who's no longer with the group, unfortunately, he moved away, but he's one of the coolest people in our group for sure. I'm sure everyone else in the group would agree, and we miss him. But he was helping me through it, as he always does. He's a super smart guy, and we're going through each part of how you to figure out the time, because you have to do it 3 different times. You do it 3 different ways. You're flipping over the cards, and very quickly you're flipping over the cards. Another one, you're dealing the cards out and passing them around, and it's a different way each time. And it's all very, very fast. And we're like, wow, this is ridiculous. And we're just like laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. But at that point, we hadn't bothered to flip over the cards yet. For some reason, the stack was just sitting there. We didn't even look at the other side of the time cards. And they're like, wow, this is really ridiculous. At least it should be easy to tell what the time is. Then we flipped over the cards and saw that it was an analog clock with no numbers on the face. And Greg and I just burst into laughter. I mean, it just tears in our eyes bowled over just the sheer ridiculousness of it. And I'm sure that's not what the designers intended. Oh, man. The game felt like work. It just wasn't fun. It was a chaotic mess. It's kind of sad. A chaotic mess should at least be, kind of fun and frenetic. But even so, it's still just felt like work. So I appreciate what it was trying to do. It is cool having to try to figure out all the different things. The process of elimination can feel satisfying, but on the other hand, once you realize that you might be completely wrong, it can feel very frustrating instead of satisfying. So can't recommend this one. I guess there was a reason why this one went out of print. I have higher hopes for Mystery of the Abbey, which seems to come in and out of print, but seems to be much more well regarded. So maybe I'll give that one a shot. Still love Antoine Balza. Still love the one game of Serge Lagut's that I've tried, Shadows over Camelot. But I think certainly there's a reason why this is in their earlier field of work and why they've moved on to bigger and better things. So check out their later stuff. Avoid this one. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and everywhere. Take care.